Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down complex topics using the source material itself. Today, we're diving into a pretty intense series of accusations that went viral in the world of online religious debate.
Okay, let's get right into it. This is a heavy claim, and it's really at the heart of the whole dispute we're looking at today. Our goal here isn't to take sides, but to really understand the specific evidence the source presents to back up a statement that strong.
So, who are the key players in this online clash? On one side, you have Sheikh Uthman ibn Farooq. He's an Islamic preacher based out of San Diego. And on the other, you have Rob Christian, a Christian polemicist who's very active on YouTube. So this whole explainer is really an analysis of the claims made by the critic against the preacher, and we're using their public broadcast as our source.
All right, so the first major allegation we're going to look at is one of physical deception. It's an event that became pretty infamous in these online circles, and it really set the stage for everything else.
So here's the story. According to the source, Sheikh Uthman claimed that he was the victim of a knife attack, but the critic alleges that this whole thing was staged. The main claim is that the blood you see on the Sheikh's shirt wasn't blood at all, it was ketchup. The idea was to create a fake story of an anti-Muslim attack to mislead his followers. And yep, this single incident is what earned him the nickname Sheikh Ketchup.
Okay, so that first claim is all about physical theatrics. But the argument doesn't stop there. The accusations actually escalate from the physical world into the world of scholarly texts, and this is where they allege a different and maybe even more serious kind of deception.
First, to really get what's going on here, we need to know what a hadith is. In Islam, it's a recorded tradition, or a saying of the Prophet Muhammad. And these are a huge deal. They're a major source of religious law, really second only to the Quran itself.
And now, the other key term, a footnote. You know what this is. It's just an explanatory note from a modern editor or scholar. You find them at the bottom of a page. It is not part of the original ancient text. And trust me, this distinction is absolutely crucial for what the source claims happened next.
So, according to the source, here's how this supposed deception went down during a public debate. First, Sheikh Uthman makes a big claim. He says that all prophets in Islam are al-Masih, the Messiah. When he's challenged on this, he pulls out a paper as proof, saying it's a hadith. But here's the core of the accusation. The source alleges he actually merged the real hadith with that modern footnote and then passed it all off as one single ancient sacred text.
Now this, right here, is what the critic points to as the smoking gun. This phrase, "my dear reader," was found in the text the Sheikh was reading. The argument is pretty simple. Sacred texts just don't talk like that. That's the style of a modern commentator speaking directly to you, the reader, not an ancient religious tradition. It's definitive proof, they claim, that this couldn't be a hadith.
But it gets even deeper. The critic alleges that the footnote wasn't even about the Messiah. They claim it was about the gentle Sharia, a topic related to punishment and beatings. On top of that, it's alleged that the Sheikh misread the Arabic, changing a word just enough to make it sound like Masih, and basically force a connection that just wasn't there.
So, we've gone from a staged attack to misreading a text. The next allegation takes it another step further. According to the source, he didn't just misrepresent a text, he invented part of one by adding material from a completely different modern source.
So, in a follow-up video, trying to prove his point, Sheikh Uthman showed a page from a tafsir, that's a book of Quranic commentary, once again trying to argue that all prophets can be considered the Messiah.
Now, check this out. The source alleges that if you go and look at the original text, the classical scholars describe al-Masih as a singular person, Jesus. But in the version the Sheikh presented, a new line suddenly appears at the bottom, a line that says Messiah can refer to any prophet. The critic claims this line was added to fundamentally change the entire meaning of the text.
So that raises the big question, right? If that text wasn't from the original book, where did it come from? Well, the critic alleges it was lifted directly from a modern website.
And this slide really illustrates that claim perfectly. On the left, you've got the text from the Sheikh's page. On the right, you have text from the modern website islamqa.info. The source argues this is basically a copy and paste job, where a conclusion from a modern website was tacked on to a classical text to make it seem like the ancient scholars backed up his argument.
Okay, so this is where it all pivots. The source uses these specific examples, the ketchup, the footnote, the website, to build a much broader and far more controversial argument. It stops being about just one man and starts being about the Islamic texts themselves. You can see a clear escalation in the critic's argument here. It's like climbing a ladder. First rung, accuse Sheikh Uthman of specific lies. Second rung, frame these lies not as just his own mistakes, but as part of a necessary tactic for Islamic preachers. And then the final leap, the top rung, argue that this supposed need to deceive comes from what the source calls inconsistencies within the Quran itself.
And to support this huge claim, the critic points to verses just like this one from the Quran. The source highlights that in one canonical reading, the verse says many prophets fought, while in another reading, it says they were killed. Fought or killed. Those are very different outcomes. The critic argues that Sheikh Uthman refused to explain this difference, and they frame that as evidence of textual instability.
So the takeaway from the source's perspective is that these textual differences, like a prophet fighting versus being killed, are not minor. The critic argues they create fundamental contradictions that necessitate the very kind of deception they claim to have exposed in Sheikh Uthman's presentations.
So after going through this entire detailed anatomy of an accusation, it leaves us with a really challenging question. In these high-stakes online debates that are watched by millions, where faith and reputation are always on the line, how can any of us watching tell the difference between a sincere error, a simple misunderstanding, and a deliberate, calculated attempt to deceive?